Hi, I'm Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and this is the video version of my article on how to help your hair pulling clients, or 5 tips to overcome trichotillomania, which isn't easy to say. So this video is an approximation of the article, so it won't be exactly the same word for word. So a client I'll call Laura really cared about how she looked, and she was undeniably glamorous. You know, she had a perfect complexion, a beautiful set of teeth, and full, luscious hair. Only it wasn't. And during our first session, she removed her wig shamefacedly to reveal shredded follicles and patches of bare, raw scalp, like a ravaged crop field, she said. And she told me, can you believe it, she said. I've done this to myself. How self-destructive can you get? And she told me how ashamed and stupid she felt. Now I asked her why she felt she pulled out her own hair. Why would she do that? What do you feel trichotillomania gives to you? What does it seem to promise you? I asked. And she told me that it might sound mad, but that sometimes it actually felt kind of good to pull at her own hair, almost like a relief. But she said it's also terrible to see in the mirror what you've done to yourself. I'm an intelligent person, she said. How can I stop doing this to myself? It's crazy. I can't carry on with it. And of course, Laura wasn't alone in pulling out her own hair. Trichotillomania is a private but widespread condition affecting up to 1 in 50 people at some point in their lives. So that means that millions of people are doing it. But how can we help the hair pulling client? Well, firstly, we can explore the pattern of the pulling. Laura knew everything about hair pulling. She knew that trichotillomania is variously described as a habit, an addiction, even a facet of obsessive compulsive disorder. She knew that it commonly starts in the teenage years, as it had for her, and that it's much more common than most people know. So we discussed when it had begun. For her, it was 20 years earlier. What had been going on at the time that it started, and it was a messy relationship breakup, academic exam stress, and other stresses as well. When it happens, so the triggers, when stressed or bored. Importantly, when it doesn't happen, when she was with her friends or relaxed with her boyfriend. How an episode of hair pulling naturally stops. And for her, it was when it hurts really badly, or she has to do something else involving other people. Someone comes round to her apartment. So once I got the danger times or triggers and other particulars of the pattern, we looked at how we might start to break that pattern. So tip number 2 is we can start to help our clients break up the pattern by introducing another behavior, which sounds simple enough. So I asked Laura about times when she thought she might pull at her own hair, but then it just hadn't happened. So we're looking for exception times, and doing that for any emotional problem is a vital bit of information gathering. And she said, well, usually it's when I've suddenly become distracted by something else. Then it's like the moment has passed and the urge has gone. Now, as simple as it sounds, we explored what Laura might do instead of hair pulling when she got the urge. And she felt she could go for a walk or type on her phone what she was feeling and everything that hair pulling had stolen from her over the years. Now, she actually later reported finding this form of expression really useful. This for her was a powerful way of urge surfing, in other words, riding out the urge until it passed without either fighting it directly or giving into it. One hair puller I worked with was lucky enough to own a swimming pool and would get changed and swim every time she got the urge to pull at her hair. Using distraction sounds so obvious, but what you're doing here is retraining the brain to the point where it starts to feel more natural not to pull in response to these trigger times. We also need to look at what stresses a person and teach them new ways of dealing with stress, so that the raison d'etre of hair pulling no longer exists. but we can certainly go deeper than this. So thirdly, we can begin to deal with the unconscious impulse. Now, of course, people often just find themselves pulling at their hair without having been aware of any trigger or any thought that preceded that. But there's always some kind of trigger, even if it's unconscious. Now, here's something that's going to sound maybe a bit crazy, but along with the hypnotic reinforcement work we did, this really helped Laura. So I asked her to purchase some of those athletic leg weights and put them around her hair-pulling arm, which was her right arm. During danger times, she was to do this, and basically whenever she was alone, she'd wear this weight on her arm. So she could still pull, she wasn't trying not to pull, but there was another element introduced into the pattern. Now the focus became redirected into the effort of lifting her arm. So she actually expressed concern that if she did carry out on her pulling with the weight on, she'd develop a horribly over-muscled right arm. And that became a concern for her, but she did carry out the task. And again, this dilutes the old impulse by adding another element to it that wasn't there before. After a few days of doing this, Laura felt the urge to pull, even when not wearing the weight, had diminished by around 85%. So actually, this is a facet of scrambling the pattern so it no longer runs on smooth tracks. Which brings me on to tip 4, which is that we can use the scrambling technique for trichotillomania. So scrambling is a principle-based hypnotic technique that aims to spoil the pattern of the problem, disrupting it to the extent that it can no longer run anymore, a kind of derailment of pathology. Consciously, Laura already knew all the good reasons not to pull her hair out. She needed to feel differently, not just think differently about pulling her hair out. Scrambling is a hypnotic technique in which lots of successive mini trances are used to break up or scramble an old pattern so that ideally the client can't, or finds it very difficult to, fall back into the same problematic behavior in future. So first, get the steps of the pattern in order by asking the client to close their eyes and envisage the initial step of a hair-pulling episode. It might be the step before the first step, feeling bored or stressed or whatever it might be, or a certain time of day. Then get them to open their eyes. Now we have them close their eyes again and access the second step of the episode, and so on until the point at which the episode naturally comes to an end. So they're accessing, in your therapy room, each and every step of the pattern behavior. They're teaching you how they do their problem. Once we have the pattern in order and the client affirms they can hypnotically access the state, we start to scramble it. Now we encourage the client to inwardly experience the pattern in the wrong order. After making sure they can do it in the right order, we start mixing up the order or going straight from the initial urge to the feeling after the episode is concluded, which for her was a very sore scalp. We might also intersperse the pattern with a totally unrelated state of mind, such as being out with friends in nature or being with her boyfriend, the opposite to the hair-pulling trance state. So we're putting in another state into the pattern to dilute the state. Eventually, Laura found that she could no longer even feel the initial urge to pull her hair, but just went straight to the feeling of pain and regret whenever she even thought about the urge to pull. So we'd really spoiled the pattern. We'd rained on the parade of the problem pattern. And lastly, we can use hypnosis to help the client preview a longer pull-free future. One interesting facet of using the scrambling technique is that it's like a way of getting the client ready for deep hypnosis. It tires the client out so that after using it, they're beautifully ready to experience deeper and more prolonged, relaxed hypnosis. So after scrambling, when Laura was well and truly ready for deep hypnosis, I had her practice drifting out of herself if she even thought about hair pulling and feeling separate from it. I suggested to her, when you stop tormenting your own scalp and let it breathe and live, it's going to begin to heal beautifully. Take time to really think about how you're going to feel and look in the future once your own hair has been liberated and had a chance to really flourish. Really enjoy these sensations from the future as you relax completely right now to my words. And I had her hypnotically time travel, seeing her hair recovering and growing stronger, fuller and thicker, even as she slept. 2 years later, Laura came to see me for another issue to do with her work, and I noticed her hair was thick and luscious. And she said, "Before you say anything, this is not a wig. It's a real deal," she said.